record, share. I'm going to select the top screen. And I'm going to click the share button. And that's how you start.
Good evening. Today is January 12th. S&P 500 sold off in the morning and was promptly bought back around noon and pretty much did nothing for the rest of the day, closed unchanged. So not much, uneventful kind of day. But Russell 2000 was the front runner today, going as high as 1.65% and making new all-time highs. And of course, Tesla was up because it's never down 2 days in a row. It was up almost 5%. And bonds made another low today, which I'm sure Victor will talk about later. There was talk of food inflation as well, with commodities, corn, wheat going up 6.5%, and soybeans around, corn 6.5%, wheat and soybeans around 4% up, and oil was up over 2%. So there is a lot of food inflation chatter. And other than that, I would say not much happened. Victor?
Recall that the purpose of markets is to siphon money from the weak and give it to the strong, the infrastructure, the members of the exchange, the institutions that have unlimited capital, the high-frequency traders that get a break in commissions and in fact receive an emolument for all of their trades. Rather than paying a commission, they actually receive money for their trade. So remember, that's the purpose of markets, is to give the top feeders profits at the expense of the bottom feeders, while keeping the bottom feeders with enough hope for the future so that they will continue. And from that standpoint, the market was very satisfactory today.
Yes.
It started out, it only had a range of 3808 to 3790. So it only had a range of 20 points. Now, remember, one of the multifarious ways for day traders to lose money and for the weak to give vig and profits to the strong. It's not only the commissions and the bid-ask spread and their unfortunately their bad timing, but they don't have as much capital as the strong ones that I just mentioned. So because of that, if the market takes its normal swings, which on a volatile day is 50, 60, 100 points, that's too big for the day trader to withstand. He has to, either he gets a margin call, or he gets fearful, or he has a stop as to how, or the other half comes in and berates him. By the way, one of the very important lessons that a weak person and the public can find is is not to have a point that will take them out when they lose so much. In other words, you come to Vegas with a $10,000 stake and you tell your other half that if I get down to $500, take me out. Or you tell the dealer you can actually leave a note with the dealer that you refuse to lose so much money. So most people have a stop loss when they lose a certain amount. Much better to have a stop gain when you make a certain amount, although that has to be tempered by the fact that unless you hold until the end of the day, none of the systems that you normally trade will work. Anyway, from the standpoint of the infrastructure, of the top feeders in the firmament, the carnivores that eat the herbivores, that eat the detritivores, and so on. It was a pretty effective day. It started out, there was only a 20-point range, but it did manage to get down to 37.66, which was a good 40 to 45 points away from the top. So anybody who was buying, like me, would have been subjected to the gambler's ruin, and the other half telling him to get the Hades out of the market. By the way, that very frequently happens on weekends. Friday is down a lot, and all the other halves tell the trader, whatever you do, don't lose as much on Monday as you did on Friday. They beat him up over the weekend, and then there's further liquid. By the way, does that ever happen to you, Miss Sennett?
It doesn't. I keep my half separate from that. It's easier that way.
I see. Well, you have a very good control. That's very important advice. To should never take advice from anyone.
That's true.
I hope you don't lose money by listening to me. But in any case, when someone else gives you advice, then you never know how strong their belief is and what their advice is based on, when they're going to change their advice, and you become dangling in the wind. Soros was very good that way. Whenever he had a position, he would go on, in those days, the big media television, and he'd allow them to know what his position was. He'd be shorting the stock market, or shorting bonds, or shorting the dollar. And also, then he'd have purportedly, he'd have one of his traders call up the media and say, you know, the market looks terrible, so and so. Have you noticed that stocks are down 10 points? And then the media would understand that a big decline was occurring. And of course, he was so gifted and had such a reputation that whenever he made a trade, the brokers that took his trades would alert their customers to that the palindrome was selling. In fact, when I used to trade bonds for him, sometimes they'd give me a choice market. In other words, there wasn't a bid. Incredibly, I didn't have to pay a bid or ask spread. So like they'd say 107, in that case it would be 8700 choice. So I could either buy or sell the bid or ask, but then at least when I did something, I would be able to alert their clients that the palindrome was on this side or that side. And so many people followed him that it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course, a lot of the big people would follow him. I think that's one of the main reasons that he was successful. We'd have a lunch, for example, in which he would alert all the participants who controlled about 99% of the total money. You know, every big brokerage house, every big mutual fund. And, well, you don't need more than 10 or 12 at a dinner. And by the time that, and he always would make his trades in advance, and then all these people would be following him. I've always wondered why his very big partner, who's famous, whose first contact with me was to say, "Fuck you." And then he called me back immediately and said, "Oh, by the way, that's a compliment." When someone does, it's one of those philosophical triple negatives. Actually, he would say "fuck you" as a compliment. In other words, we both did our job.
Is that how he broke the Bank of England, George Soros? By making people...
He broke it because he had such fantastic credit lines. I mean, how does a person go against the Bank of England or the central banks now that can print trillions of dollars with impunity? And the idea that somehow he was going to force the Bank of England to capitulate and to stop raising their discount rate. They raised it about 2 or 3 times then. And all they have to do is, the banks are in a very friendly, you touch my back and I'll scratch your back. They're all in a very close relation with each other, and all a bank has to do is, the central bank has to do is to call up Citibank or call up Goldman Sachs, say, "We'd appreciate it if you didn't extend any more credit to such and such who's actually hurting the market right now." Actually, in that case, hurting the political agenda. So it was such a risky kind of thing. He was betting that somehow he could oust all the central banks that were working against him. But his credit was so good that they decided in that case that, let him have his day. It's the palindrome. Maybe we should let the pound devalue. So it was a ridiculous trade. If you did it 100 times, 99 times, it wouldn't work. But
Right.
if you have 100 of the biggest traders and institutions following you on that thing, it would have, it's sort of like Bitcoin now. As Peter Thiel said about PayPal, it got so big that all the legislators were afraid to stop it because they'd get some bad publicity. And in the case of the day, actually it was Stanley Druckenmiller who broke the Bank of England. There were enough followers and so on that they didn't. It would have caused too much havoc if they did their usual and they cut off the credit of all the institutions that were providing credit. Oh yeah, along those lines, one of the white shoe banks has a big ad playing on Twitter. If the gist is that if you buy a diversity fund, then the top quartile of diversity funds have a return something like 23% of them beat the market. Now, normally if you had an ad like that, the SEC and all intelligent investors would throw up their hands. There are so many things wrong with those statistics, and there's partial statistics. They don't talk about the return of their fund. They talk about measures of capital for a small part of the distribution. But it's typical of what I mentioned. It's the government, the congressional technology complex that we have now, that you can have a diversity ad, sort of like Harvard, and suggesting that all investors should buy a venture capital fund through them. We're in a brave new world. There's no question about it. And today, what happened? Well, when the impeachment got hot, the market rallied. It went up from 36.68 to 36.90. And by the way, it was a proper kind of day. We opened well below the round number, and within 15 minutes we were above the round number. So Professor Biden and his constructal numbers were again validated. The market, the round numbers never up a number. About 5 times the market went below 3,700 overnight and then went back. So there was certainly a time for the normal regularities to work out. If every time the market was below 36.90, you bought it and played it for a nice 10-point rise, and even at 15 if you were fasten the trigger. So that worked. But the main thing that happened was bonds had their first up day, and the 10-year rate went up by 40. The price went up by 40 basis points. There was a tremendous rally in bonds, and mainly the 10-year rate. They had an auction at 1 o'clock.
Right. That
used to be a very important part of the market firmament, and now everybody. So even with inflation going through the roof, as you mentioned, yet interest rates were able to fall. And we had 5 down days in the prices of interest rates, and we had one. Today was a nice up day, and it sort of was discombobulating to the stock market. It's usually a yellow day where bonds, where the 10-year and 30-year are down in price and stock market is up. So for a while it was like we were going to have a blue day with stocks down and bonds up, but the round number exerted its gravitational impact on the stock market. Instead of staying in the 36.80s and 36.90s, 5 minutes before the close was within a point or two of the round number. So I think it was a pretty normal day. If the president was impeached, the market probably would have gone up 5% in its zeal. So,
is there any significance to the 2 red Mondays, red days?
Yeah, that's a very
you could look on the screen.
Observation. Why didn't the market go way up today? Because last Monday it went down. Remember, it was down 100 points and it closed down 50 or 60 points. And then it went up 4 days in a row to new high after new high. But it doesn't like to let you make money the same way twice in a row. So this Monday was very similar to last Monday. So instead of having a big rally in stocks and a big decline in bonds, which went down a full point on corresponding Tuesday, and stocks in the next 3 days had 4 days of rally. They rallied 100 points. So it's good. It's good to look at the consiliences in colors. But I mean, the amazing thing today is we had 2 down days in stocks, but
barely.
Oh, and let's see, NASDAQ. Did NASDAQ manage to have 2 down days?
Yeah, it did.
So we had two down days, and what all we were down? We were down 0.1% from the all-time high. As I said, the market is Ted Williams. Elon Musk refuses to go down. The market, no matter what happens, as Partridge said, it's a bull market. It's a bull market. I don't know what it's going to do tomorrow, frankly. It should be a rally at the end of the week as to tomorrow. It went straight up last night. Gave you a Google of times that you could take 10 fast points out of them, from below the round number to above the round number. And then, of course, to punish those who try to make easy money, it, instead of going, when it went to the 36.90, instead of stopping there, it went to 36.66 to shake out the week and provide extra money for the infrastructure. Well, that's all I have to say today. I haven't, I'm not as wise as I should be. Did you watch the football game?
No, not into it that much. I used to watch the Super Bowl occasionally, but other than that, no.
Was it big in Belarus?
No, soccer it's people don't like football, American in Europe by and large. And I never really appreciated it, but at some point I really got into it, and it's a great game, very interesting, much more strategic and much more involved than soccer or other games. I think it's very much underappreciated in Europe. There was some interesting stuff on the Florida hospitalization rates today at the Blaze by Horowitz. There was an article saying that Florida has roughly the same hospitalization rate as 2018 flu season. And that's with no lockdowns and no mask mandates. And with lots of people coming out of state, bringing in the various infections, you would expect the hospitalization rate to go through the roof. Yet it's barely almost as in 2018, and only 6% higher than the previous 2 years. So certainly not even nearly enough to justify all of the shutdowns. And that's also assuming that because people are panicking and you are admitted to the hospital with COVID much easier than with the flu. And with all of this, with hospitals being paid extra for COVID patients, with all of this, they still could not bring the hospitalizations levels up. So anyway you look at it, it's a lot of nonsense with
Here's
COVID.
a good article from the Post. They have Governor Cuomo begging for a big Biden handout.
Right. He said yesterday, Cuomo said yesterday that we need to reopen or we would have nothing to reopen to. And that's after months and months of bashing Florida for being open. So now he wants to reopen. Okay.
Well, today they said that all the empty commercial buildings and hotels should be converted to public housing. That's their fix. But of course, all the localities are hoping desperately that some of this, a lot of the $2 trillion of bailouts, the money that's not going for doing gender studies in Pakistan and for propping up the Kennedy Center with another $100 million. that if there's any money left, it should go to all the localities, the woke localities on the coast
Right.
that have that promised to ban right to work laws and that will continue all the pensions and the overtimes and the necessary for building unions must be involved in all construction activities. So, and the hundreds of other bloated infrastructures that the states have.
Right.
But getting back to my first point about the purpose of markets, of course, it's only there are two other purposes of markets. It does give, it actually provides a magic carpet for making money. All investor has to do is buy and hold, like 60,000 fold a century. But today it started out with only that 20-point range, and I said something. It isn't cricket. Is cricket big in Belarus, by the way?
No.
Well, it's very big in all English-speaking countries, and there's a famous incident where Trevor Chappell, and he's lived in infamy ever since we were playing an important cricket game, and England was ahead by 1 run against New Zealand. And on the last pitch of the game, he rolled the ball to the batter so that the batter wasn't able to hit a long drive and even the game. And that was considered the most unsportsmanlike thing. And ever since, it's been the watchword, the apotheosis of it's not cricket. And they always used to say that about my squash playing. It's not cricket for a Jewish boy to be winning all these tournaments. But today it wasn't cricket for there only to be a 20-point range because the weak weren't able to pay their dues to the big boys. But they quickly made it a game of cricket by going down 40 or 50 points straight down and forcing all the little investors out. Tomorrow, maybe I'll read you from the book, The Psychology of Speculation, written about mainly 1907 articles, and it talks about all the ways that the little person makes mistakes. Now they're always buying it. They were doing exactly the same thing in the 1900s that the Robin Hood boys are doing. There are 100 different examples there. Read it tomorrow. Okay, do you have anything else?
No, I think that's about it for today.
Okay, I'm sorry I wasn't more fulsome with the market firmament today.
Well, you can't have predictions every day. Sometimes market is just a random walk.
Well, we can say that the public will pay their dues to the infrastructure tomorrow for sure. Yet, by the end of the week, we don't have a high, we've gone 4 full days without a all-time high and should be ready to correct that by Friday. Thank you very much
Thank you, Vic.
for your incentives. Bye.
Thank you.